And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiate. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to MentorTalks. My name is Asha Bay, your host from the Office of Alumni Affairs in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Our office opens the door to the million-strong Exchange Alumni Network and professional development and grant opportunities for alumni of U.S. government, educational, and cultural exchange programs. MentorTalks is a chance for you to connect with Exchange alumni leaders and hear their stories and career advice. Like our next guest, who is a communications strategist who leads social and digital communications as a contractor for the Artemis missions at NASA. Thalia Patrinos is also an Exchange alumni of the Fulbright English Teaching Assistantship Program. Welcome, Thalia, and thank you for joining us on MentorTalks.
Thanks so much. I'm really happy to be here.
You and I met earlier this year at the South by Southwest conference in Austin, Texas, where you and some of your colleagues were doing a session on how NASA combines art and science. And I was wondering if you could tell us more about that session and how NASA does combine art and science to reach people.
Yeah, that was a really incredible opportunity. And I'm honestly still in disbelief that it happened. But yeah, we were asked to put together a panel about combining art and science, which I think is something that people don't think a lot about. They kind of put science and STEM and mathematics in a box, and then they put creativity and artistic subject areas in another box. But the truth is that a lot of these things cross paths, and especially with the work that I do and the work that my colleagues do at NASA, we have to blend art and science a lot of the time, most days of our work, because we have to communicate to the public the science of the missions that we are talking about. So for the Artemis missions in particular, which is kind of my beat, that's my subject area, I work with social media and digital media in order to explain to the public why we're going to the moon. How is this different than when we did it in the Apollo years? And so I use a variety of different formats and mediums to do that, including graphic novels and online children's book and social media and, augmented reality filters. And so I get to be really creative in my job, which is one of the best things about it. And so do a lot of my colleagues. Some of the colleagues on my panel were graphic designers, animators, data visualization experts. And so you have to think about, okay, we have all this hard science and data, but how do we make people actually understand it? Which I think is almost just as important as collecting the data itself is, okay, how do we make this applicable to the public? How do we make this understandable for someone who doesn't have a science background? And art is really instrumental in doing that. So the panel at South by Southwest really explored each of these topics. And it was amazing to see how many people showed up to the panel. It was like a packed room, which I was not expecting. I thought it was going to be like 2 people. And I was like psyching myself up, like, if there's going to be 2 people there, like, we're going to put on the best panel ever. But it was like a packed room. So it was very validating to see that people were interested in the work that we do, combining art and science, specifically in the space industry at NASA.
That's cool. I was going to say, it sounds like it's like you're doing space diplomacy the way, you're like reaching people, and it reminds me of, some of the diplomacy efforts that we do at the State Department. And I know, I believe for Artemis that we are connected on that. NASA and State Department are connected on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And NASA itself has a global audience. And especially when you look at our social media platforms, I think we have 100 million followers on Instagram. So when you think about the numbers like that, you're like, we really are reaching people all over the world. And Artemis in particular is an international effort. And so we have, I think, over 20 countries that have signed the Artemis Accords that have committed to safe and peaceful exploration of the moon and Mars. So it's really exciting to be entering this space where you're working with a lot of international partners. In fact, we just announced the Artemis 2 astronauts. These are the astronauts that are flying around the moon aboard Artemis 2. And it is an international crew. We have a Canadian Space Agency astronaut on that crew. And if you think about the International Space Station, which in a lot of ways is a test bed for the technologies that we'll be using on the moon, that has an international crew. We have crew members from all over the world, from Russia, from Italy, from Germany, from Japan. So a lot of things in space. I would say a lot of missions that we work on are international efforts, and Artemis especially is an international effort.
And part of that, when you're reaching people, you're just I remember one of the things from the panel was that you keep it at a certain level, so that I think so for more people can tap into the knowledge or just understand it more, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, my experience as a middle school math and science teacher before I came to NASA was actually really helpful, because a lot of the times when we're writing products for the audience, just a public audience, we tell ourselves that we have to explain it at like an 8th grade level, because a lot of people don't have background in science or math or, a lot of the really complicated subject areas that the space missions touch on, physics and orbital mechanics, and so on and so forth. And so in order to make sure that we are reaching as wide of an audience as possible, that's kind of the rubric that we use for ourselves. Could someone at an 8th grade level understand what we're talking about? So like I said, my experience as a teacher, both during my Fulbright and during some of my other jobs, has been very helpful during my NASA career.
It sounds like it, yes. Yeah, and speaking of your Fulbright and your teaching career, so you went to South Africa on a Fulbright English Teaching Assistantship. What was that like, and how did that experience shape your career?
Yeah, that was an incredible experience. In 2016, I had the privilege and opportunity of going to Port Elizabeth, South Africa. The name of that city has since changed. It's now called Gqeberha. And so it was just this marvelous opportunity that I had to get experience teaching, but also implement various different projects in the community that I was placed in. I had already fallen in love with South Africa when I studied abroad in Cape Town in 2013. It was such a magical experience, and I just had no idea how hard I would fall in love with South Africa. And as soon as I left, I promised myself I would come back somehow. So I applied for the Fulbright. I think I applied a couple times, actually, but I finally got it. And it was such an amazing opportunity. So we helped the teachers at the school that we were placed at teach English lessons, specifically reading lessons. But we also had the opportunity to develop the library that was on campus. It was a spot where a lot of students would hang out between classes, during lunch, before and after school. And so my colleague and I, held a fundraiser where we raised some funds to update some of the reading materials in the library, in addition to install a couple of computer stations so that the students could use the computers to do research for their school assignments, or could apply for jobs or apply for college. So we really kind of took that hub that a lot of students were already hanging out in and sort of developed it into this, this communication center. So it was really, really cool. And we really bonded with a lot of the kids that we worked with, especially the group of library monitors. These were the kids that really like made sure that people were using the library space correctly. They were just an incredible group of kids. And, you know, we worked on plays with them, and we created an art and literary magazine together. It was just so much fun. And yeah, I really can't, I can't stop talking about it. It was just really, really cool.
That's great. No, I mean, it sounds like it was a really great experience, and you gave the students there a lot to, you know, to remember you by, and as well as just to help them.
It was fun, and also we learned a lot from the kids. And while I was there, I took the opportunity to take a couple classes. So I took Afrikaans, I took Xhosa. So I learned a little bit of the language. I'm by no means fluent. I've also forgotten most of it. But at the time, it was really cool, and sort of sparked my interest in learning languages. South Africa has like, I think about a dozen official languages, which just goes to show what a multicultural hub that country is. And so one of the coolest things, I think like the most fun fact about South Africa, if you don't know anything about South Africa, is that when they sing the national anthem, they sing it in every single language, which is about a dozen different languages. And so I think it just demonstrates how multicultural that country is. And yeah, I just completely fell in love with it.
That's a fun fact.
That is a fun fact.
And yeah, speaking of fun facts, so you were telling, I think we were talking before, you know, we met today, and you were talking about how you lead a circus troupe in DC, and then some of that was traced back to your experience in South Africa. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that segue. This is a fun fact. Yeah, so you know, I just have a a very strong interest in circus arts and circus education. This is something that started since my early undergraduate years. And so I specialize in fire dancing, fire performance, and acrobatics. And when I was living in South Africa, both times when I was studying abroad and when I was there for my Fulbright, I had the opportunity to go to Africa Burn, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a Burning Man-like festival in the Karoo Desert. And it's an amazing if you ever have the opportunity to go, you should go. It's just an incredible festival, and I met people there that I'm lifelong friends with. And so they had a fire dancing camp that I stayed with. And so I connected with these people, and again, created these lifelong connections. And so when I was in South Africa for my Fulbright, I was invited to teach circus education in a number of different places. I think I had taught a double staff class in Cape Town, and I think I also taught hoop classes in Jeffrey Bay, which is like really close to Uberha. And so it was an opportunity to take what I was learning inside the classroom, how to teach, how to be a good instructor, and then applying it to my circus arts hobby. And so that kind of created a trend that has continued throughout my life. Every year I make a point to teach circus education in various festivals and venues, sometimes in the country, sometimes abroad. And it's just really, really fun. And people are always like, oh, this is a weird thing that you do. Yeah, it's just a weird thing that I do.
I don't know if it's weird. It's just, you know, something, to me, it sounds like it's just like a fun thing you do. And it's just, yeah, I feel like it's more of your creative side.
Yes, it's definitely creative. And you also mentioned the troupe. So I help lead a troupe that is based in the DMV area in DC, Maryland, Virginia, called Lucio Liberation. And so we have opportunities throughout the year to perform artistic pieces that we worked together to create. Last year, we did a hour-long show that was inspired by Shakespeare's Macbeth, which goes also into my love of Shakespeare. But, we had acrobatics, we had fire breathing, and we had, a lot of like sculptures that we had used to make art. And it was just really, really cool. And so it's really, I think it really is helpful for someone who's creative like me to have a collaborative space and people who I connect with on a personal level who just want to make weird art with me. It's really great to be able to do that and also have an audience. DC, Maryland, Virginia has a lot of people who are really interested in watching it. So it's really cool to have like a very thriving circus and fire scene here.
That's great.
Yeah.
So it looks like we're running out of time, but Thalia, before we go, what advice would you give to fellow exchange alumni who want to serve their country by working at NASA or another federal government agency?
Oh, I would say you should apply. I guess that is kind of obvious, but for me, it took a couple of years of me applying until I got my Fulbright. And I think it can be very easy to get discouraged if you don't get it the first time, especially for programs that are like Fulbright, that, are kind of like top level, like top notch, top tier programs. It can be discouraging if you don't get it the first time, but I feel like a lot of people don't have that experience of getting it the first time. So I would just say apply, don't get discouraged, keep applying until you make it. It's such a valuable experience, and what you learn abroad, not just in your assistantship or your grant or whatever it is you're focusing on, but learning how to interact with different types of people, learning how to exist in an environment where it's not United States centric. I feel like this is really important for people to understand that there's a whole other world out there. And, to take that back with them when they come back to the United States. That's why I think it's a really valuable experience.
That's great.
So
great advice.
So apply. So apply.
Apply. And don't forget about the contracting route, right?
Yes. Also, one other thing I wanted to mention is that I am a contractor for NASA. I work for the company Mori Associates. And so I think a lot of people who ask me how they can get jobs at NASA, they always are looking at the civil servant route. And I always try to explain that most people who work at NASA are contractors. And so you want to open yourself up to more opportunities and more jobs by looking at the companies that the different NASA centers are hiring. So if you aren't finding any civil servant positions, look for the contractor positions because there are a lot of different opportunities available. Yeah.
That is great advice. Thanks for taking the time and joining us on Mentor Talks.
Thank you so much.